So this should really go without saying, but you're not constrained to use the STAR method for any question that you're getting asked in a job interview. And I'm specifically thinking here about the general types of questions that tell me about yourself or what do you want to work for this company. Now, some of you might argue that, hey, Dan, but I could still use the STAR method when talking about myself. For example, when highlighting some very interesting topics from my career, you could highlight a project using the STAR method. And yes, I would definitely agree that's a perfectly fine scenario. But from here to feel constrained to use the STAR method for pretty much any question they ask you, it's a far way to go. And it's kind of the same approach with the question, tell me about your strength or your weakness. Like, it's perfectly fine that you talk about 3 weaknesses and then you ask them, hey, which one do you want me to develop more on? As it is, of course, fine to talk about your strength and to highlight it with something very interesting in a STAR format if you want. But again, it's not mandatory to use the STAR format. Now, to give a little bit of a more advanced scenario here where it's again not mandatory and there are probably better ways to employ than to use the STAR method, is the open-ended types of questions. How do you deal with ambiguity? Or what's your management style if you want? Especially for more senior types of roles where you really have to give these questions a good thought beforehand. And given the dynamic in a job interview, you might want to have a rather general statement of how do you generally see working with ambiguity. And even if you gave this a good thought and you prepare your 10-minute answer to have the perfect possible answer, even in STAR format, how do you deal with ambiguity? In a job interview, the expectations might be different. Like maybe that the interviewer will prefer to have some rapid fire rounds and they would expect, the expectations would be you to answer this in 30 seconds or less. So I'm talking here about very senior types of roles again. So again, you're not constrained about to use these STAR method. And just to, as a closing note here to clarify, so the behavioral questions are those questions that are asked for you, to you in order to see your past behavior in order for the employer to determine your future performance on the role. So I know it sounds very counterintuitive and it sounds pretty unfair for some of you, but that's what works. In a job interview, that's one of the most efficient methods that there are, so you cannot really change these things. And there's also the situational types of questions. What would you do if you were, given a specific scenario? And again, in my opinion, you should not feel constrained at all to use the STAR method, not even for the situational types of question. These questions are more likely to get asked for program manager types of roles and product managers if you want. But again, the STAR method is a recommendation. It's a recommendation that works very well, especially for junior roles, where the expectation is that the better the structured, the more structured the communication is, the better the chances that you'll be well understood in a job interview context. And don't forget that your interviewer, will have to take notes and evaluate you, given these STAR method or given these protocols. So that's why these companies advertise the STAR method. But from here to using it for any question like what's your salary expectations, I believe that's a very long way to go. So hopefully this was helpful.